Does anyone have a match? Thank you. Thank you. What are you all staring at? Have you never seen a Prime Minister ride the Underground before? Yes, now let me ask you this. If the worst came to pass, and the enemy were to appear on those streets above, what would you do?
Fight.
Fight the fascists.
Fight them with anything we can lay our hands on.
Broom handles if we must, street by street.
They'll never take Piccadilly.
Never take Piccadilly, indeed. And what if I put it to you all that we might, if we ask nicely, get very favourable terms from Mr. Hitler if we enter into a peace deal with him right now? What would you say to that?
Never.
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 Never. Never. Well, you will never give up.
No, never.
Then out spake brave Horatius, captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds? For the
ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods.
Are you crying?
Yes, I blab a lot, you know. We all have to get used to it. What stop is this?
It's Westminster, sir.
Westminster. It's my stop.
That was Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill in the movie Darkest Hour. Fabulous movie. I have to tell you that I had to be told that was Gary Oldman. He looks and speaks so much like Winston Churchill that, you know, to look at it, you would think it was Winston Churchill. This is a story of really probably the darkest chapter in human history, the beginning of World War II. In the early months, and Winston Churchill was at the time, if you're not familiar with the history of this, he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And Hitler had Europe on the ropes. He had, in the space of a few short months, completely overrun the continent. So the continental Europe was lost. Great Britain was the last holdout and the only hope. And so he's facing all of this pressure. And by the way, he knows exactly what needs to happen. Churchill does. He knows who he's dealing with. He said earlier on, you can't reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. So he knew that. But the pressure was on and things had gotten dark. While this particular scene is going on, there are hundreds of thousands of British troops that are trapped in Dunkirk in France. On one side, they have the German army. On the other side, they have the English Channel. And this is the bulk of the British army. Churchill has all of these political rivals, including Neville Chamberlain, who should have known better. I mean, he made a deal once with Hitler, and that fell through. And Lord Halifax, who was his defense minister, who was going behind Churchill's back to try to carve out a peace deal with Hitler. And it looked like a lost cause to everyone. And it looked like Winston Churchill had no options. And so what did he do? He did what he he did something that he did very often. He went AWOL. No one could find him. At least no one that was important could find him. And he decided he was going to go down to the underground, the railroad, and get on the train and talk to the people that he was protecting, that he was making decisions for. And that's what that scene is. And he just asks them, what should I do? I need your help. I'd like your advice. And, sometimes when the decisions are big and important, when your very existence is at stake, when matters are so weighty that your very life is threatened, sometimes it's easy to forget what's really important. And they reminded him. He needed that to make the decisions that in the end would save Europe from tyranny. But it took the leader with the people, listening to the people, knowing that the course he had taken all his life was the right course. You see that at the very end? He stops just before he gets off the train. And he looks at them, and they look at him. And he's looking to them for strength, and they're looking to him for strength. And everyone knew in the train what was right and true. Let's take a break and sing. So we're in the midst of this sermon series called Easter People, and the sermon title today is It's All About You. Say that with me. It's all about me. Okay, hold on to that because we're going to get to it in just a minute. And essentially, what's happening in this particular lesson that Gene read to us, and it sounds like a very complicated situation, but it's really not. Basically, what's happening is that there are some true things, some true principles in the Christian faith that were being compromised by church leadership. And in the face of all of that, we needed someone to stand up and say, this is right, this is wrong. Here's what's happening. Peter is the head of the church at this time, and the church is young, and it's vibrant, and it's growing, but it's also facing some real challenges. There's challenges from the outside because there are people who see the Church of Jesus Christ, as a threat to their way of life. And so the church is persecuted from the outside. And then on the inside, you get all these splinter groups and factions, one of which is called the circumcision party that Gene read about. It's a small group of people who can't quite get over the idea that Jesus has died for their sins, and that's all that is necessary. And so they want to add something else to it. They want to say, no, that's not enough. Jesus died for your sins for sure, but there's something else you have to do first. You have to follow the law. That's what's happening here. And so Peter, he's stretched on both sides. And by the way, this is about the existence of the Christian faith. It's about the core identity of who we are. And Peter is listening to all of these people that make the decisions and all of these people that are driving the church, and he's feeling the pressures from the outside. and he starts to cave. He starts to take a path that's comfortable rather than right. So let's just do a little review here, just so we're clear about what's happening. So the Christian faith is simply this. It's all about you. Say it. It's all about me. It's not about me. Sounds like double talk, doesn't it? But it's true. It's all about me. Jesus loves you, personally, individually. So much so that he gives up his life. He sheds his godhood. He takes the form of a human being. He becomes in every way a human, lives a human life, dies a human death, and rises from that death. And he does that all for you. Christianity is all about you. Say it. It's all about me. In order for that to work, it's not about you. Say it. It's not about me. Not about me. It's not about me. Why? Because when you start working towards your own salvation, when you start doing things that create that salvation, all of a sudden, everything that Jesus does is negated. So that it's not what Jesus does, it's what I do to get to Jesus. And that's what was happening. That's why these factions in the church. And that's what's happening with Peter. He sees this, and he sees, on one hand, he sees all of these people who are new to the faith, and then these other folks who have been in the faith for a while, and they want everyone to do it their way. And they want everyone to do it the right way. And in the process, they are compromising who they are. And Peter, who's just trying to hold things together, he goes along with it. And Paul says no. It's all about you, and the only way it can be all about you is that it's not about you at all. I have been crucified with Christ, so that it is no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives within me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live not by what I do, not by what I become, not to get better or closer or more personal with Jesus or with God. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith, by believing that someone has come to me, and that someone is God, and that someone has said, I am the most important thing in his universe, so much so that he comes to me. It is no longer I who lives. It is Christ who lives within me. And anything else, any other attempt to try to get closer to God, it's like jumping up to try to grab stars. You can't climb that high. You can't jump that high. I mean, jump, jump, jump. You spend your life jumping, grabbing something that is so far out of your reach that you'll never get there. Jesus doesn't want you spending your life grabbing for something you can't reach. He brings it to you because you have a bigger purpose and a greater mission in this life, something we'll be talking about next week. But for right now, we need to stay here and understand that it's Jesus who comes to you, and that is the first principle, and that is the last principle. And in terms of your salvation, that is the only principle that matters. Jesus comes to you. And so Paul says to Peter, hey, you know better than this. I'm calling you out on it. And then he turns to those who are new in the faith, and he says, stop jumping for stars you can't reach. Live life free. And live life in a way that changes the world around you rather than just jumping in place. It is no longer I who lives. It is no longer I who does for God. It is God who does for me. Let's sing. So a number of years ago now, I was on a backpacking trip, a youth trip with my high school group. This was clear back when I was in Storm Lake. And we were in Idaho backpacking. I think they were the Bitterroot Mountains, if I remember right. Doesn't matter. We were at a Lutheran Bible camp, and we had this guide, college girl, who took us out and led the way. And you know, when you're backpacking, one of the things that tends to happen is that as the week goes on, your backpack gets lighter because, you know, unless of course you like jump in the lake with all your clothes on, then it gets heavier. But if it's supposed to get lighter because you're eating food, right? So the more food you eat, the lighter the backpack gets. Well, this guide, for whatever reason, it wasn't working that way for her. The backpack kept getting heavier and heavier and heavier. Every day she put it on, it just felt like a little more weight. So that by the last day, it was so heavy, she almost fell backwards, putting it on and taking it off. Well, we figured out what had happened. One of my adult sponsors decided that it would be a good idea to put rocks in the bottom of her backpack. And so he slipped them in before starting to hike, and he'd slip them out before she opened her pack afterwards each night. And he put more in and more in. By the last day, he had a stone in there like this. And it's like, oh my. But you know, I want to encourage you, when it comes to your life, don't carry things that aren't yours to carry. And don't let anybody put stones in your backpack that you don't need to carry through life. Don't let them do that. Far too often we do that. We put all these expectations upon ourselves. Either that or else we live in a world, in a culture where those expectations are around us all the time and we start listening to them. Expectations like, okay, so if you want to be more successful, you do this. If you want to be more popular, you do that. If you want to get ahead in the world, you make these decisions and you go in this direction. And on it goes. You know what I'm talking about. It happens with middle schoolers, it happens with high schoolers, it happens with college kids, and it happens with adults. The only difference is that we just keep graduating up to new and better things. And here's the trap. Every day you put on the pack, it gets a little heavier. So it makes a promise. Do this and you'll be more successful. And so you do that, but you're not more successful. And then it says, oh, well, you also have to do this. So you do this, and now it's more, and now that's supposed to make you more successful. So you do this, and you do this, and that's supposed to make you more successful, and it doesn't work. And on it goes. This is the definition, classic definition of a false God. It promises to deliver something, but instead, it makes you its slave. And we do it, like I said, with success. We do it with money. We do it with popularity. We do it with our size and our weight. We do it with our athletic abilities. We do it in so many arenas in life, in our businesses, in our communities, the way we're more popular, the way we're more noted. It's all over the place. And please understand that those are all good things, as long as they don't become the thing. As long as you're not looking to them to satisfy your soul. Because it won't. The pack just gets heavier. And your soul just gets hungrier. You know, I have to tell you that in the last year or so, I've been in the subway with you folks. Once in a while, I'll take an afternoon and I'll go out in the parish and I'll just see people. And you know, if I don't do it often enough, then you start coming in here and finding your way back to my office. And we start talking. And more often than not, it's because we're looking for meaning in all the wrong places. We're looking for something to satisfy our soul with things that take life rather than give life, that provide slavery rather than open up freedom. And so I want you to all remember and live by this. God has come into your life. He has come because he's all about you. There is nothing else that you can do to earn it. And here at First Lutheran, that is what we are about. We are about that with the people who sit in these pews. We are about that for the people who are here with us watching on Facebook Live. We are about that with people who have never darkened this door and maybe don't even know where First Lutheran is, even though they've lived in Algona all their lives. This is what we're about. Jesus Christ and him crucified. And you and I have died with him so that we can live in the freedom that he alone gives. And then we share that message of life with others. Far too often, the church is guilty of this. We have these people that are out there, they come in from the streets, they come in from all kinds of places, and they are so tired of trying to become something that they'll never become. And then we say to them, Jesus died for your sins. There's nothing left to do. And then, right on the heels of that, we set up a whole bunch of things that they have to do on the rear end. You think it's not true? I have been teaching at Iowa Central for 16 years. And I have been watching and reading their papers as they come in. One of them is a personal convictions statement, a faith statement for Christians. And there are many Christians who take my course. Do you know what the most, when they talk about what saves them, what is the religious solution, do you know what the most widely quoted verses are? You ready for this? The 10 Commandments. Oh, my stars. Now, don't get me wrong. The 10 Commandments are an important part of who we are and what we do. They are fences that keep us from getting in trouble. But they are not the way to salvation. Yet, people who go to church every Sunday have come to believe that that's where it's at, that that's how they get to heaven. My friends, we are failing. We need to go into the streets, down in the subways, and listen to the people around us. And they will tell us to stay true to who we are. Jesus died. It's all about you. Jesus died. It's not about you. Live in that freedom. Shed yourself of all of the false gods that will bind you up in a slavery that never ends. Live in the freedom of Jesus and share that freedom with others. Amen.